How did you get introduced to BTS? Like, was it through work or was it just casual listening? Or?
I first became aware of BTS in fall of 2017. So about 3 years ago, I was interning at Billboard, and BTS was getting ready to release Love Yourself, Her. And it was their first album that cracked the top 10 of the Billboard 200. And so there was a ton of coverage on them. I was interning with another writer who was a big BTS fan, a big fan of a lot of different K-pop artists. And so she kind of was filling us in about like why culturally this was significant. And I had some questions, but at the time, the whole thing was unfamiliar to me. And so with my first brush with BTS, I kind of thought, all right, K-pop, whatever, cool, not my thing, happy for them. I'm gonna go on my way, not a big deal. But over the next several months, as they were preparing to release Love Yourself, Tear, you let me know. But that's when I started, shortly before that I had started working for Forbes as a contributor. And so I was in the business of covering major achievements on the pop charts, artists who were doing extraordinary things and, breaking records. And BTS was beginning to fit that criteria. They were starting to really experience their breakthrough in the States. They began their streak of #1 albums on the Billboard 200. And suddenly, they were everywhere. They were performing at award shows. Tons of mainstream publications started to give them coverage. And so I said, yeah, I want a piece of that. I want to write about them too. And so I started writing about the pre-release records that they had broken with Tear. And shortly after that, I think a few months later, that summer, they put out Answer. Idol was a huge hit for them. The album itself, of course, went to #1. And that summer, they also sold out their first US stadium show at Citi Field within, I think, like 30 or 45 minutes. And so, the spring and summer of 2018 was just a huge time for BTS. And that's when I really started to get invested in their music and also, I guess, kind of the concept of them as a cultural phenomenon here in the States.
Yeah, that's quite a journey. Like, you were there right from the start of their US breakthrough.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I still feel like, this band has such a rich history. They have such a huge catalog of music. I still feel kind of like I'm new to this whole thing. There's certainly stuff that I am still catching up on. There's plenty that I don't know yet, especially pre-2018, pre-2017 especially. But yeah, I've been really invested in writing about this group for a little over 2 years now. And it's been really rewarding to watch them flourish.
That's awesome. And I think like it always feels like they're still not at their peak. Like they still haven't reached it. There's still so much that they can. Yeah.
It's kind of scary, honestly. It's like a force of nature. There's always pressure when artists put out new music to, hit a new milestone, break a new record. How many copies does this thing have to sell, or how many streams does it have to get to be considered a success? And at a certain point, every artist is going to plateau. That's just inevitable. That's how the industry works. But with BTS, I get the sense that they are nowhere near their peak. And the way that ARMY talks about, these milestones, it's like there's never a sliver of doubt that, this next comeback, this next album or single is going to be bigger than the one that came before it. Just the confidence in that fandom is amazing.
Yeah. So these days, because we always talk about that single, like everyone releases a single and like the rest of the songs in the album don't get so much attention or any attention almost. Like people really concentrate on that one single. And BTS, as opposed to that, usually have such conceptual albums. They always release more than one video. They always even if just the fans and it's not something that's like supposed to chart on Hot 100 or something, they always make sure to put so much emphasis on the album as a whole, which is something we haven't seen that much anymore.
Mhm.
Do you think that has an impact on how much albums they sell, or how like why are they doing it so differently than anyone else?
Yeah. Well, as far as the impact on album sales, I think it's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle. It's like BTS makes albums that are conceptually and musically rich, and so fans buy a lot of them, and then fans buy a lot of them, and so then BTS continues to make music that is like of a certain caliber. I think like both parties have kind of come to expect a certain level of quality there. And obviously they've just like continued to reap the benefits from that. I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
Why do other artists don't bother with that part? Right, like they release songs, they have full albums, but they don't really put an emphasis on an album being a playlist as opposed to, or a concept as opposed to a collection of songs.
Right. Yeah, well, it's unfortunate, but I think that in the last several years, I think the pop music model, and when I say pop music, I'm including any sort of popular music, so especially hip hop as well. I think it's kind of reverted back to like the old days of like the 50s and 60s, where an album was pretty much defined as a couple of popular singles and a bunch of filler. Especially because streaming plays such an important role in music sales these days. It's really easy to just like crank out an album with 18 to 20 songs that are 2.5 minutes. They all kind of sound the same. There's a handful of singles that dominate the charts forever. And then the rest of it is kind of just background music. You can put it on a playlist. You could listen to it at a party. You could like play it when you're studying or doing work or at the gym or whatever. And it's like, even if you're not listening attentively, that artist is still getting your streams and they're still getting your money from it. So I think, and I mean, obviously we see that divide come up a lot with BTS. Like BTS is a largely sales driven band when it comes to like how they chart in the United States. That's not really the norm these days. And so I think, again, I wouldn't say that like they're making music, that they're making these like really conceptually rich albums just so that they can sell more copies, but like I certainly think that is a byproduct of them making albums like that.
I would agree. Like we buy it because the music is so, we know what we're getting would be a full concept with that we like each song, even if we don't necessarily like every song on the album, we'll probably like most. Just making sure I'm recording. Yeah, I think to go back a bit to what you said before about the fact that these days music is broken down into numbers, right? And everyone looks at how much you get, how much you sold, and kind of the artistry of it is a bit lost, or it gets pushed down, all for the sake of reaching that number one spot. And BTS themselves have talked about it, not now, but like back in 2018, when they got that number one album, they were like, we achieved everything we thought we would and more. Like no other K-pop artist, Korean artist got an album at number one. No one sold out arenas back then like they did. They were walking this path that no other Korean artists have walked. And they were like, okay, we got farther than we thought. What comes next? Like, are we still excited about this? Does this still interest us? And their whole song Black Swan is exactly about that. It's about that moment where music just doesn't do it for you anymore. But I think for them, because they're so in tune with themselves and they stop and think about it and listen to it, they don't really get caught up in those numbers. It's a nice bonus. You even hear Yoongi say that they want to be nominated for a Grammy so they can perform at the Grammys. It's not so they can win at the Grammys, which obviously they want. They want to win a Grammy. But he specifically said, I want to be nominated so I can perform on that stage. I want to perform solo, just BTS on that stage. And that's just them. They're all about the music. They all went into it, not by accident, but because this was their passion. And I think the way they were raised as a group, they managed to keep that passion, which for a lot of artists, unfortunately, because their companies just sell their music for nothing with those stupid bundles that completely cheapen everything they do. all in order to sell more. Just the music isn't there anymore. So yeah, I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. Like,
I really do appreciate every time. It's like every time there's a new milestone that BTS reaches, the way that they respond to it, there's so much humility and gratefulness for their fans and for the opportunities that those new records will present. Like you said, so much of their mission is just to reach other fans, to be able to perform their music on the biggest stages and the biggest platforms possible, solely for the purpose of letting other people experience that and to take part in that joy. You're right. There's nothing, obviously, when you're one of the biggest musical acts in the world, you're going to have to consider things like album sales and ticket sales. And obviously there's a whole business to this. But, when I look at BTS and when I listen to them talk about their career or participate in talk show interviews or anything, nothing about it seems cynical or jaded. It seems like they really want to be there and they have an appreciation for these opportunities and a real hunger to keep performing, to keep breaking new ground, and that's inspiring to watch.
It really is.